I used to think the worst part of a toxic interaction was the moment it happened, the passive aggressive comment, the cold shoulder, the tense meeting where you just know something is off. But I was wrong. The worst part, the hours, sometimes days of overthinking that come after. One weird text, one vague "we need to talk," one moment where someone's face slightly shifts and suddenly I'm in full detective mode, replaying every word, every glance, every possible meaning. Did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Should I have handled that differently? Here's the raw truth. Our brains hate uncertainty. So when we don't have all the information, we don't just sit with the discomfort, we start filling in the blanks. And let's be honest, we rarely fill them in with kindness. Research actually shows that when we feel uncertain in social situations, our brains default to threat mode. We assume rejection, criticism, betrayal, even when none of that is actually happening. But here's the kicker. Overthinking doesn't protect us. It binds us to the very thing we're trying to move on from. And the more time we spend analyzing, replaying, and decoding, the more space that toxic interaction takes up in our minds, until it's not just a moment anymore. It's a weight we carry. So today we're going to talk about how to stop overthinking toxic interaction. Because most of the time, it's not the interaction itself that does the most damage. It's the version we keep replaying in our heads. And the good news, we can change the story. Our brains love to create narratives, especially negative ones. They must not respect me. They're trying to make me look bad. But here's the thing, just because you think it doesn't make it true. The next time you start spiraling, pause and ask yourself, what's the story I'm telling myself? Naming it gives you power over it. I remember sitting in a coffee shop after a tense conversation with a coworker. She had been short with me, barely made eye contact, and ended the meeting with a clipped, "Okay, thanks." That was it. But my brain decided this was evidence that she was upset with me, and not just upset, furious. My mind started crafting this whole story. Maybe I had offended her. Maybe she thought I was incompetent. Maybe she was planning to talk about me behind my back. And before I even finished my latte, I was sitting there completely stressed out over something I wasn't even sure was real. Here's what I've learned. When we don't have the full story, we make one up. And unfortunately, when we're feeling anxious or insecure, we don't tend to write happy endings. Instead, we draft worst-case scenarios. Our brains string together assumptions, insecurities, and half-truths, creating a narrative that feels so real that we don't even question it. But here's where we have to pause and call ourselves out. Just because we think something doesn't mean it's true. Our thoughts feel real, but they are not always reliable. They're shaped by our past experiences, our fears, and even our mood that day. If you've ever convinced yourself that someone was mad at you, only to later find out they were just having a bad day, you know exactly what I mean. So what do? We name the story we're telling ourselves. This is a game changer. The moment you catch yourself spiraling, stop and say, okay, what's the story I'm making up right now? Say it out loud if you need to. Write it down, bring it into the light. Because once you name it, you can challenge it. I had to do this with my coworker. After I left that coffee shop, I sat in my car and literally said out loud, the story I'm telling myself is that she's mad at me, that I did something wrong, and that she thinks I'm not good at my job. And the moment I said it, I realized I didn't actually know any of that. It wasn't fact, it was fear. And when I stepped back, I could see other possibilities. Maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe she was distracted. Maybe she had a headache. And guess what? Later that week, she apologized, completely unprompted. She had been stressed and didn't even realize she came across as distant. This happens in all areas of our lives. A friend doesn't text back and suddenly we're convinced they don't like us anymore. A boss sends a vague email and we assume we're about to be fired. Someone cancels plans and we think it's because they don't want to see us. But when we slow down and name the story, we can see how much of it is just a narrative we've created in our own minds. Now, this doesn't mean we ignore red flags or dismiss our intuition. If something feels truly off, it's worth paying attention to. But there's a difference between observing a situation and inventing an entire dramatic subplot in our heads. And most of the time, the story we're telling ourselves isn't reality. It's just a reflection of our own self-doubt. So the next time you find yourself overthinking, pause, name the story, challenge it. Ask yourself, do I have actual proof? Is this fact or is it just fear? Because the moment we bring awareness to our thoughts, they stop running the show. And that's where freedom begins. Not every weird email or awkward conversation has a hidden meaning, but we hate uncertainty, so we try to complete the sentence. They didn't text back because they're mad at me. No, maybe they're just busy. If you're going to make up a story, at least make it kind. Our brains are meaning-making machines. When we sense something is unfinished, an odd interaction, an unreturned call, an unread message, we rush to complete the sentence. And let's be honest, we don't exactly fill in the blanks with, oh, they're probably just having a great day and forgot to respond. No, we go straight to, they must be upset, they're avoiding me, I must have done something wrong. I learned this the hard way with a friend of mine. We had made plans to catch up, but at the last minute she canceled. No explanation, just a short text, hey, can't make it today, sorry. And that was it. No reschedule, no let's pick another time. And I don't know about you, but my brain does not like unfinished sentences like that. It started writing its own version of events. She doesn't want to hang out with me. Maybe I said something wrong last time. Maybe she's pulling away from our friendship. But then I stopped and asked myself, what do I actually know? Here's what I knew. She canceled. That's it. What I didn't know was why. But my brain was working overtime to fill in the blanks with worst case scenarios. And it wasn't until later that I found out she had been dealing with a personal crisis and didn't have the energy to explain. It had nothing to do with me. That moment taught me something huge. When we don't have all the information, we must learn to sit with the discomfort of an unfinished sentence. And I get it. That's hard. The unknown makes us anxious, and our instinct is to solve it. But in reality, most of the time, our problem solving is just overthinking in disguise. Psychologists call this intolerance of uncertainty, our tendency to fear the unknown and prefer even a negative explanation over no explanation. Think about that. We'd rather believe they don't like me than sit with, I don't know what's going on. That's how uncomfortable uncertainty makes us. But here's the truth. Learning to tolerate uncertainty is one of the most powerful things we can do for our mental peace. Instead of rushing to complete the sentence with fear, we can choose to leave it open-ended. Instead of, they didn't text back because they're mad at me, we can say, they didn't text back. That's all I know. Instead of, they ignored me in the meeting because they don't respect me, we can say, they were quiet. That's all I know. And if we're going to fill in the blanks, let's at least do it with kindness. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're having a tough day. Maybe it has nothing to do with me at all. Because chances are, it doesn't. This isn't about ignoring red flags. If someone consistently treats you poorly, that's not an unfinished sentence. It's a pattern. But when it's just a single moment, a one-off weird interaction, we owe it to ourselves to let the story breathe before we rush to a conclusion that hurts us more than the actual situation. The next time you catch yourself overanalyzing an interaction, pause. Resist the urge to complete the sentence. Sit with, I don't know, for a moment. Because the reality is, most of the time, we don't know. And that's okay. The more we can accept that, the less power these tiny moments have over us. Feelings are real, but they're not always reliable. If a toxic interaction left you feeling rejected, ask, what actually happened? What words were actually said? What's fact? And what's my fear talking? When we slow down and separate emotion from fact, we stop giving power to our worst assumptions. I remember a moment when I received an email that felt off. It wasn't outright rude, but the tone was clipped, a little cold. And the second I read it, I felt that familiar wave of self-doubt hit me. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Did I mess this up? Before I even had time to question it, my body reacted. My stomach tightened, my chest felt heavy, my mind started replaying our last conversation, searching for clues. And here's the thing, when we feel something deeply, it's easy to believe it must be true. The intensity of the emotion makes it feel like fact. But what I've learned is that our emotions, while valid, are not always accurate messengers of reality. They are shaped by our past wounds, our fears, even how much sleep we got the night before. Just because I felt like I had done something wrong didn't mean I actually had. This is where we have to pause and ask, what actually happened here? What do I know for sure? Because the moment we separate emotion from fact, we take back control. Let's break it down. Fact, I received a short email. Feeling, I feel like they're upset with me. Fact, they didn't smile at me in the meeting. Feeling, I feel like they're angry at me. Fact, they didn't respond to my text for 2 days. Feeling, I feel like they're ignoring me on purpose. See the difference? The fact is neutral. The feeling is the story we attach to it, and that story is often shaped by our own insecurities, not reality. Research shows that when we feel threatened, emotionally or physically, our brains go into high alert. It's called negativity bias. We're wired to detect threats, even when there aren't any, because our brains would rather overreact than miss something important. So when we experience an ambiguous interaction, our instinct is to assume the worst. And overthinking toxic interactions feeds this cycle, making us see threats that might not even be there. But here's the good news. We are not at the mercy of our emotions. We can slow down and question them. The next time you catch yourself spiraling after an uncomfortable interaction, take a breath and do a reality check. Ask yourself, what do I actually know? What am I assuming? Is there another possible explanation? Most of the time, we'll realize that the facts are neutral, but we've colored them with fear, with self-doubt, with stories from past experiences. Now, this doesn't mean we ignore real red flags. If someone consistently belittles you, manipulates you, or makes you feel small, that's not just a feeling, that's a pattern, and that needs to be addressed. But when it's just a single weird moment, a vague comment, an unread text, let's not give it more weight than it deserves. Because here's the truth, when we separate emotion from fact, we free ourselves. We stop handing over our peace of mind to things that might not even be real. And that is how we take our power back. If something really feels off, don't assume, ask. Instead of spending days overanalyzing, go directly to the source. Hey, I noticed some tension earlier. Are we okay? 9 times out of 10, the issue is either small or non-existent. Clarity is freedom. I remember a time when I convinced myself that a close friend was upset with me. We had been talking at a party, and at some point her energy shifted. Her responses got shorter, her laughter felt forced, and then out of nowhere she excused herself to go chat with someone else. Now, I could have left it at that, but of course I didn't. Instead, my mind went into overdrive. Did I say something wrong? Did I come off as annoying? And before I knew it, I had spiraled into a full-blown narrative about how I had somehow ruined our friendship in the span of one conversation. For the next few days, I kept replaying the moment, picking apart every detail, and not once did I consider simply asking her about it. Because let's be honest, confronting uncertainty is terrifying. It feels easier to just sit in our assumptions than to risk an uncomfortable conversation. But here's the problem. Overthinking is just avoidance dressed up as analysis. We think we're figuring it out, but really we're just circling the same thoughts over and over. And the only way to break that cycle, get the actual facts. So eventually I worked up the courage to ask her. I sent a simple text. Hey, I might be totally overthinking this, but the other night it seemed like something was off. Are we good? And do you know what she said? Oh my gosh, I was feeling super anxious that night for personal reasons. I wasn't myself at all. It had nothing to do with you. That was it. That was the whole story. Not some big betrayal, not a secret grudge, just something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. And I had wasted days of my life stressing about it. Here's what I've learned. Most of the time, the things we overthink aren't even real problems. They're just unresolved moments that could be cleared up in one simple conversation. Now, I know what you're thinking, but what if they really are upset with me? And my answer, then wouldn't you rather know? Wouldn't you rather face it head on than spend days or weeks tormenting yourself over something that might not even be an issue? When we ask directly, we get clarity, and clarity is freedom. It frees us from the exhausting cycle of assumption and second guessing. It gives us real information to work with instead of a spiral of fear-based guesses. Now, I'm not saying we should go around confronting every single person who gives us a weird look at the grocery store, but when it's a relationship that matters, a friend, a coworker, a partner, it's always worth checking in. Because here's the truth. We lose so much peace trying to mind read people instead of just talking to them. And when we stop assuming and start asking, we take back control. We stop giving power to stories that don't serve us. And that changes everything. Some people thrive on conflict and confusion. If someone wants to keep you in a cycle of overthinking, that's a red flag. Healthy relationships don't make you guess where you stand. Protect your peace. If a person's behavior consistently leaves you doubting yourself, it's okay to step back. I used to believe that if I just tried hard enough, I could make any relationship work. That if I gave enough grace, extended enough patience, and kept proving my good intentions, the other person would eventually meet me halfway. But here's the hard truth I had to learn. Some people like to keep you guessing. Some people benefit from your confusion. I remember a former colleague who always kept me second guessing. One day they were warm, laughing at my jokes, making plans for lunch. The next they were cold, barely acknowledging me in meetings. And just when I'd convinced myself that maybe I had done something wrong, they'd swing back to being friendly again. It was exhausting. I spent so much time analyzing every interaction, trying to figure out what I had done to cause the shift, until one day a mentor of mine said something that stopped me in my tracks. Healthy relationships don't make you guess. That hit me hard, because the truth is, I wasn't overthinking for no reason. My gut was telling me something was off, and instead of recognizing the pattern, I was blaming myself. I thought if I could just figure out the right way to show up, I could make the relationship stable. But real stability doesn't come from walking on eggshells. It comes from mutual respect, honesty, and consistency. And let's be honest, some people thrive on inconsistency. They like keeping others in a state of uncertainty because it gives them a sense of power. If you're always guessing how they feel, then they control the relationship. They decide when you're in and when you're out. And that's not just unfair, it's toxic. So how do you know when it's time to step back? Here's what I've learned. If someone's behavior consistently makes you question yourself, if you're always overanalyzing their words, replaying conversations, feeling like you have to prove your worth, pause, ask yourself, is this relationship built on clarity or confusion? Do I feel emotionally safe, or do I feel like I'm always one misstep away from losing their approval? Because in a healthy relationship, whether it's a friend, a partner, a boss, you don't have to earn your place over and over. You don't have to keep proving your worth. This isn't about cutting people off at the first sign of difficulty. Relationships require effort, communication, and grace. But effort goes both ways. If you're the only one trying, if you're the only one seeking clarity, if your peace of mind always depends on decoding someone else's behavior, that's a red flag. And here's the most important part. You have permission to walk away from relationships that keep you in a constant state of overthinking. You don't owe anyone endless emotional labor, especially when they're not meeting you halfway, because at the end of the day, your peace is not a game piece for someone else to move around. And the relationships worth keeping, they don't leave you questioning where you stand. At the end of the day, overthinking toxic interactions doesn't protect us. It drains us. It steals our energy, our confidence, and our ability to be fully present in our own lives. And for what? A text that wasn't answered fast enough, a conversation that felt a little off, a moment of uncertainty that we turned into a full-blown crisis in our minds. Here's what I want you to remember. You are not responsible for reading minds. You are not responsible for fixing people who refuse to communicate clearly. And you are not responsible for making sense of someone else's inconsistency. What you are responsible for is your peace. And that means learning to sit with uncertainty instead of rushing to complete a sentence that was never yours to finish. It means separating fact from fear, choosing curiosity over assumption, and, when necessary, having the courage to step away from relationships that keep you in a cycle of doubt. Clarity is freedom, and that freedom starts when you decide to stop overthinking every little interaction and trust yourself enough to let go. You deserve peace. You deserve relationships built on trust, not guesswork. And you deserve to walk through the world knowing that your worth is not up for debate. So go forward with confidence, with clarity, and with the courage to let go of anything that keeps you stuck. Good luck. And more than anything, be kind to yourself. You've got this.